And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Expose the Manosphere. And actually, I have a special guest today, and many of you guys know him as D. Durrell. And today, we're actually going to talk about how the Manosphere and also its affiliated groups, other groups on YouTube, often use a social media platform as a form of therapy. And before I introduce the guest and kind of go into the subject, I actually want to talk about how I came across this idea. So, and this gives you insight to how I make videos. So often I'll make a list of topics that I want to talk about. And one day I want to talk about how a lot of people in this space use YouTube as therapy. But the problem was I'm not a therapist. I don't have a background in psychology. And then I realized, oh, there's a professional therapist in the space, and he can give much better insight into this topic, which mine would have just been pretty amateur. So without further ado, Didi, can you introduce yourself real quick? Are you there? Oh, he's got muted.
I'm sorry, I missed the last 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, I just told him why I'm doing this topic because I realize a lot of people in this space often use the platform as a form of therapy.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So you can introduce yourself really quick before we go into the questions.
Okay, cool. No problem. Well, for those that don't know, my name is D. Durrell. I have a couple of YouTube channels. My primary channel is D. Durrell Rebirth, which is basically a cross between the Manosphere content. I also deal with issues in regards to the pro-Black sector that kind of focuses on issues of Umar Johnson and etc. And then I also talk about psychology, counseling related issues that are related to the Black community and American culture. Also, my channel that I'm really focusing on molding at this point is D. Durrell Life Solutions, which is basically fundamentally a therapeutic type of channel that focuses on counseling and psychology and mental health related issues as it relates from a business standpoint, also from a practice standpoint, and also from a functional standpoint as it relates to various aspects of issues that occur within American culture as a whole, as mental health affects every community as a whole, and that can range from as far as counseling children to adults, the uses of psychoactive medications, therapeutic activities, focusing on relationships, various types of mental health issues. Also, that particular content also serves as a correctional space to kind of educate people in the form of what we call psychoeducation in regards to the misusage of a lot of mental health terms that seem to be overly used and misused throughout the YouTube space. And I kind of somewhat fact check and educate people on the proper usage of some of those terms, and also how it correctly applies.
Okay, that was a good introduction, and it kind of we can actually jump straight into the interview then, since you're a professional therapist. Many YouTubers admit to using YouTube as a form of therapy, but I'm curious, what's your opinion on this?
It's to me, I look at it from two ways. I look at it from the position of a therapist, and I also look at it from the position of a content creator. Mainly as a therapist first, because that's basically what I operate as for a living, and I've been operating as such for well over 16 years. And so when I first entered into the space, my goal was to increase the dialogue and knowledge and education on mental health issues so that I could somewhat bridge the gap between African Americans or the African American community looking or in some way viewing mental health services as a means of focusing on all the different ills that happen within our community. For years and years, mental health services and counselors and therapists had a very have been seen in a very negative light due to a large percentage of our population and our demographic being involved in social services, education, and other services in which they were mistreated and so forth. So there's a certain level of racism that has influenced our population to somewhat be skeptical of services from and many of those services were delivered by people that did not look like us. And so that has in some way infused a mindset that we shouldn't trust people, and rightfully so. There are some things to justify that, and they should not trust those who operate in those particular professions. And so one of the reasons that I decided to get involved in this field in the first place is because, number one, there are not a lot of black male therapists, and there's really not a lot of black female therapists. Period. Our participation in this field is probably less than 15%, and black males is probably less than 5% of professional licensed therapists. So with that understanding, I have seen time and time and time again in my practice and in my businesses and programs that I've been involved in which particularly people in our demographic who seem to want to um, defer to other less um, comparable means of alleviating themselves of the mental health symptoms that they have acquired and have developed over time. Thus, they have found YouTube as a means of expressing themselves and as a means of relieving whatever type of symptomology that they have. And so, what they're really doing is they're putting a mask on the issues that they have. And in some instances, particularly when they get involved in some level of conflict or adverse situations, the foundation of their mental illness in some way presents itself. Thus, you'll see someone yelling and cursing, having a manic episode. I've seen situations where people had a psychotic episode. I've seen people blurt out and say suicidal such things and homicidal things, and they act in ways in many ways that is in line with a true clinical diagnosis. So I definitely frown on that because that's not the purpose of what YouTube is used for. I think that it gives people who need the help another option of not wanting to seek therapy, but finding other means to try to replace that. However, it seems to have negative outcomes.
No, I totally agree. In fact, I did come across a video by a person who self-identifies as SYSBM saying that he was going to commit suicide. He didn't do it. He actually deleted the video like several days later. And YouTube didn't take it down, shockingly.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Well, you want me to? I can
Oh no,
comment on that.
yeah, you could continue.
And so when we focus on groups such as SYSBM, um, and I'm not surprised there was a man on there that did say things such as committing suicide. I've seen other people within the sector of the Manosphere. I've had two situations in the last 4 months in which two guys, well, actually three now, did three guys did commit suicide. One was recent. That was a black pillar. There were two others. One that I was actually on a panel with several times with one content creator. And then I heard of another person that I didn't know of. So there is a correlation between people who have mental illness and having suicidal ideations and other severe mental health issues that use um, YouTube as a means to express themselves when they are unable to do so in real life. And what I want to caution for anyone that is listening or people that someone that may have these issues is that you deterring from the problem or you trying to find other means to not deal with your issues is only going to repress and prolong the issues that have occurred. The only way that you're going to get better is if you seek the proper help under the proper management of a professional, so that you can go through the journey of improving yourself and coping with those issues in a clinical manner. And YouTube basically does not provide that.
No, I fully agree. So, of course, you talked a lot about the cons, but I'm kind of curious. Do you think there's any pros with this type of approach?
Any pros
Mhm.
to using
To
YouTube?
Yeah.
The only pros that I can see, and I've had situations in which some people could have used it as a pro, but it becomes a con, because, say for instance, someone who has, let's say they have embarked upon some level of growth and they want to be positive and express it to the world, like say, hey, say for instance, someone that has been hospitalized for the last 5 years has now embarked upon a a situation in which they haven't been hospitalized in the last 2 years. Prior to that, they've been hospitalized every year. I think it would be positive to tell your story and show the fact that you have overcame. You've given a testimonial to how therapy has helped you, and that now you're not in a functioning at a lower level. However, the danger in that is that in many situations, when people began to initiate communication about the trauma or other issues that led to that mental illness, they seem to, in some ways, they fall under this order of kind of putting themselves back into the position in which they experienced the trauma as they're explaining it. And when they're explaining it, they go into detail, significant detail, very detailed things that I think they should not be doing. And I think that it could be detrimental to their platforms, because there are people that are listening that mean them no well. If they end up getting into any type of beef or conflict, they will definitely copy that video and use that video against them, thus causing a risk of intensifying their symptoms, just by the sheer fact that they're getting into a conflict and they're seeing someone misuse the information in a manner that can anger them or heighten their emotions.
Okay, I think you made a lot of good points. So one thing I know is about the manosphere, particularly, is that okay, I'm going to put it lightly. A lot of people in this space have problems, and that's just
Right.
putting it pretty lightly. And I'm just wondering what is it that just attracts people with this kind of background to YouTube? I never a subscriber one time joked with me and told me it's like the welfare office when you learn about people's backgrounds.
Well, there's several variables that contribute to people finding this as an attractive space. This space itself, most people actually find out about the manosphere on accident. Nope, nobody really seeks out the manosphere in a sense. Usually they're typing something and they see a video, and then when they hear someone saying some outlandish things, and let's be honest, and you may agree with this or disagree, the manosphere is entertaining. It
No,
can
I
be
agree with that.
very entertaining. It is very. Now, I'm not saying the rhetoric is to me very low grade, but it can be seen very entertaining. And I think when people hear these types of things, they initially become entertained. But particularly, what happens is that what we have found, as I've looked at some research and so forth in regards to people who have engaged in incel-like behavior, is that there's a problem with masculinity. There's a problem with social capital. There's also problems that are innately geared in their ability to have a stable relationship. And so these type of people who seem to have these issues seek refuge somewhere to see if there are people who have the same issues. They want to find out, am I the only one that is experiencing these issues? They want to bond with others. They want to collab or somewhat integrate with others, and maybe they find a means of correcting this behavior. Because let's understand this, as it relates to YouTube. When YouTube was initially created, it was created as a means of people looking up how-to videos of how to fix this, how to create this, and so other people are looking at, okay, how can I get a girlfriend? How can I learn to avoid being cheated on? How can I avoid child support? Or how can I, it's so that this is the means in which some of these guys who are in some bit of desperation due to their lack of social skills, they found a safe haven to express themselves, which is not afforded to them in real life. And so this is quote unquote sort of a paradise for them, and where they can freely express themselves no matter how irresponsible and how untruthful the rhetoric is. They can
Mhm.
just be themselves, say whatever they want, and they're not going to get any pushback.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. That actually does lead me to another question I have. I realize there's some pretty anti Rail people in the chat. It's my guest though, so I respect all guests when they come on here. Um, so yeah, I'm curious about your take on how almost everybody on YouTube is like an armchair therapist, or they try to do psychoanalysis on individuals they disagree with. And I even had people try to perform ones on me and get like basic information about me inaccurate. Oh, get it wrong, I should say.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the, just kind of looking at things. That's something that really angers me in a sense from a professional standpoint, because some of these same people that you're speaking of, I have interacted with these people, giving them clinical professional knowledge, and they dismissed it because it did not fit the narrative that they wanted to some way convey to their audience. And so I am in no means married to any ideology, particularly that stems from red pill ideology, that is grossly flawed and inept, and it does not apply to real life. So my purpose in those situations is that I attempt to educate in a sense, to help brothers understand, is that, um if you feel whatever way that you feel about female nature and so forth, some of it could be justified, some of it could not. But when you start using terms in the majorative, when you start using things that are deemed as misogynistic and stereotypical, you're only putting yourself in a position that when you interact with other females, you're going to, in many ways, get the same outcome, because your whole presence of how you perceive things, consciously and unconsciously, you will tend to say things and communicate in a way that can be adversarial to females. That's why you hear a lot of these guys attempting to play therapists based on their own anecdotal experiences, in which they think that because I've experienced 5 breakups in which the women, basically exploited me out of money, I can psychoanalyze the situation better than you, D. Durrell. And actually, those type of issues are not congruent to what psychoanalysis is, because psychoanalysis doesn't necessarily deal with the conscious; it deals with the unconscious. And unfortunately, I had to deal with educating people on certain theories in which they argued me down, and they were, frustrated the fact that I corrected them on something that they knew very little about. And and when these guys encounter that, they in some way feel emasculated, in which I'm not even attempting to emasculate them. I'm only trying to educate you. So if you're going to use a term, please use it properly. That's all I'm asking. And in addition to that, in their frustration, they'll begin to say things such as, "You're not a real therapist. Your degrees don't mean anything. Where's your clients?" So they'll try to use all type of sophomoric strategies to try to make me feel less appropriate to speak on those issues. So I just take it as it is. But it is frustrating, because what they'll do is, and this is very frustrating to me, is that they'll read research. They'll read 2 or 3 research reports and they'll take a statistic out of that research, and they'll make that research. They'll attempt to place that research in a situation that it does not apply, and they'll say, "Well, this statistic said that black women chose this 50% of the time." But when you read the research, again, they're not looking at methodology. They're not looking at the introduction methodology. They're not looking at how the statistical means of measuring things and so forth. They didn't read the discussion. They didn't read the results or the outcomes. They're just looking at a statistic that's in the body of work, and then they'll choose that and say, "Whoa, it means this." And so when I began to debate people that were trying to use that as a means of in the midst of what they call their quote unquote analysis, and I try to explain to them the proper usage of the statistic, why it said this, what were the means of that outcome, then I'm called different type of names. I'm a feminist and so forth. So at that point, I feel that it's no longer necessary for me to go into any type of intellectual discourse when you're not dealing with an intellectual and people. So I have to allow those things to happen. But it in our essence, it is a bit frustrating. But what to me is more dangerous is that there are people like that who have 300-400 people listening to them, and they're soaking this in as if it's gospel. And to me, that is actually the most dangerous thing about guys who engage in that type of behavior.
No, okay. It's kind of interesting because I do read a lot on like the backlash against the anti-intellectualism that exists in the United States. And I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson actually came to my university for a campus event, and somebody asked him about that, and he thought he agreed, but he thought there was also blame to lay on intellectuals who kind of pontificate and make people who are not college educated, or sometimes people who are college educated but didn't attend an elite university, feel inferior.
Well, the problem is that, and I can understand this. This is what we have to look at. I mean, I've observed this in my studies and so forth, and also in my profession. When people have obtained a certain level of success and knowledge, and they've been validated, there's a certain level of arrogance that does come with that. Mm-hmm. But to me, the problem is that those who are not necessarily on that level, their unwillingness to listen to facts, their unwillingness to listen to those that actually know more. I mean, everybody is ignorant to a certain extent. That's just like me trying to, as a therapist, trying to educate people on technology. That's not my lane. But if I read 3 or 4 articles on automation, but now I can tell everybody about automation. No, it doesn't work like that. And unfortunately, I do think for those who do feel intimidated, they feel somewhat inadequate because of someone actually giving them information that they never knew about or they're not aware about. But you have to also look at it from this point. Expose the Manosphere is that a lot of times the pushback comes because there's a lot of eyes that are watching them. So they don't want to quote unquote look bad or look stupid or look inadequate, so to speak. So a lot of the guardiness being guarded comes from the fact of their reputation and their brand that they feel that they're protecting. And so a lot of times when these things happen, particularly I'm just relating it to YouTube, they become a bit guarded because they feel like that's going to affect their brand. They're going to affect their channel and how people view them long term. So it's a little bit on both sides, I would say.
Okay. And I'm curious about one thing, because the word projection is often used in this space. Often, like if you criticize somebody, like, "Oh, you're just projecting." Right. But I'm curious. So what does projection actually mean from a clinical perspective?
Okay. So the term projection is basically a defense mechanism. There's several types of different defense mechanisms, and we have to understand a defense mechanism is basically a means in which you subconsciously don't want to deal with something that's reality from an emotional, psychological, or behavioral standpoint. And so what you do is you try to find ways to avoid dealing with that. And so you create new beliefs and new behaviors to somewhat cover that up. And so when you're projecting, what you're basically doing, it comes from a inability to deal with whatever innate feelings that you have. And what you do is, in turn, you place them into somebody else. So if I'm angry because Expose the Manosphere did better content than me, what I would do is say, Expose the Manosphere is angry because I do better content than him. So I'm projecting my anger onto you, my feelings of how I feel, because I'm not feeling this way. So I assume that other people feel the same way I do, or a specific person feels the same way. And so usually when they use a term projection, is used in a adversive interaction between two people who are unwilling to listen to each other. And in the midst of someone possibly losing the argument, they'll say, "Oh, you're triggered. Oh, you're angry. Oh, you this and that." And in our instance, that's probably how they're feeling. So they're projecting their own feelings of how they feel at the point to someone else because they failed to deal with their own issues.
Okay, I was kind of curious because I get that a lot too. Like whenever, no matter what I criticize, people will swear that I'm just projecting whatever personal experience I've had onto them, even though it's unrelated.
Well, see, this is the problem. In order for you to appropriately apply the term projection, that you cannot assume. You have to know what you're projecting. So you can't project zero thoughts. It has to be, say for instance, if they're going to say you're projecting, they have to know the essence of the projection. They have to know what does it stem from. So if you're projecting your anger, or you're projecting some level of ineptitude or sadness, they have to know where it comes from. They have to pick out a situation and say, because Exposed the Manosphere is upset that Obsidian critiqued his article, now he's mad because I wrote an article that, he wants to falsely feel that I have to feel the same way that he does. There has to be an example that has to be placed to make the projection relevant or appropriate. You just can't say somebody's appropriate. Someone is projecting for a variety of reasons that are unknown. It has to be, well, I'm gonna say it behooves them to identify what they're projecting.
Okay, that's a good point because I'm always curious about that. Whenever people people attack me with like stuff I'm criticizing them for. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. So I've seen far too many people cry in this space about digital friendships,
Right.
and given the fact that many of them never met one another, and in many cases never even seen their faces, what did that reveal about their personal lives?
That's a good question. I'm gonna say this because I've looked at it. I've actually had some mixed feelings about this because a lot of those digital relationships can be very deeply formed over time, particularly if they're talking face to face or they're FaceTiming each other. Because now there's multiple ways to communicate, and a lot of these guys that are online, the relationship is not limited to just being on panels. The relationship also spills into emails, text messages, phone calls, and FaceTiming, or doing hangouts and stuff like that, where they're visually seeing each other and engaging. So some of those relationships, depending on how long they've known each other and what they've shared, I would deem them as being legitimate relationships that would be appropriate to somewhat be connected to someone and feel that way. But then also you have to look at the purpose of them seeking these relationships. And so to me, from a clinical standpoint, what I'm seeing is that there's some level of social inadequacy, social anxiety potentially, in which they have failed to form proper relationships with people in real life. And so they've used YouTube as a tool, just like as therapy, as a tool to fill that void.
hmm And that remind me, 'cause, I mean, this question's related, but I remember there was a YouTuber, and I'll say his name because I don't not like friends with him or anything, like Man of Tomorrow, who admitted that he's closer with people in this space than with members of his own family. And I just kind of wonder what could be going on in somebody's life to kind of arrive at that point.
Well, that's someone I know very well.
Hmm
So for that particular person, and some of the stories he's talked about, there's some things, and I know the state that he's from and so forth, and I know the culture of that state and so on. And there's a lot of things in regard to how he grew up and things he's seen in which they have a certain value system and mindset that keeps them somewhat stagnated. And being that he has been progressive and moving out of that state and pretty much forging a career for himself and doing some things uh, successfully and so on, he's at this point has reflected on his family that's behind and the things that he grew up with. And he's talked about the females that he has grown up with and the things that they are say and do. He's critiqued that and so forth. And it's for a lot of black people, they develop a sense of self-hatred for those that they grew up with. And I think that exemplifies him in a sense, his views, because it stemmed from the culture that he grew up with and how he sees black people and where they were and how they engaged in self-defeating behaviors and a lack of progressiveness that kept them in a social economic status that they could have potentially gotten out of. And for him, he chose a different route that actually worked for him. But at the same time, he looks at them. I'm not saying he looks at them less than, but he looks at them in a manner in which, how come you're not attempting to do this? How come you're not going to listen to me? How come you refuse to maybe want to do some of the incorporate some of the things that I'm saying that have proven to work? And in that area that he grows up in, I know very well because it's very close to the state that I'm in, and they have very similar ideas. There's a great deal of being content with where you are, and their way of life is basically seen as their way of life, and they don't like when other people give new ideas and new ways of doing things. They're pretty much settled in. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It could be seen as a bad thing, but that is some way synonymous with people that live in the deep south, and so particularly in rural areas of the deep south, and so for him, he's seeing that, and that therefore that has had a great influence on his mindset.
Okay. And that does get me to a question. This is something related to Black YouTube, because I've noticed this as I came across a space, which is internalized racism. And I know there's a lot of men and women in the space often have negative experiences with Black people, whether that was like their upbringing or relationship. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, they kind of have this like grass is greener complex. And even when they have negative experiences with non-Black people, they still view them as like superior. So I'm just kind of curious, like what's going on there? Because
See,
I'm not from that background, so it's different for me.
I can explain that all too well because I've had debates on this, and I've had the debates on the quote unquote um, leaving the community, the divestment, the going out overseas, and so forth. And so, what you have to understand is that many of these guys were not seen as in their real lives, and they've talked about this. And it kind of stems initially from the opposite sex, as
Mhm.
far these people were not seen as being what I would coin maybe Black enough, or not necessarily social, or having what we call quote unquote swag. And so when you've been somewhat ousted or outcast because of your lack of social skills and quirkiness, so to speak, or lack of verbal skills or proper just being able to easily communicate and interact, in which it yielded positive outcomes, you began to see, like, as the Black community and people in that particular community see you as not being quote unquote Black. In return to that, it can have a significant effect on you, in which, as you're progressing and so forth, you'll see them in the same way. I also. So in that, you begin to develop animosity and began to critique all aspects that are negative of the culture. And so in that, it grows into this situation in which, as you're progressing, you're beginning to develop relationships and bonds and networks with people of other cultures, okay, that are functioning better in a way from a financial standpoint, maybe more educated, and they're doing things in a different way that is actually more functional or seen as more functional, and it works. So in that journey, they began to look at other cultures as being superior and the black community as being inferior. That's why when you look at SYSBM, there are certain people of the high knights, I would say, who term that they want the community to be destroyed. They feel like there's no coming back because they were never able to function appropriately in that community. So they actually hate the fact that the community never never gravitated to them in a sense. So they have a lot of animosity towards that. So therefore they feel like they don't have a place in the community, particularly because they feel that it's matriarchal ran by women, that I need to go somewhere else and place myself into another culture, and that would be the best route for black men to do. So that to me is what I've consistently heard as they would talk about dating, and not just that, just interacting with other people, and then the fact of this thing about the Pookie and the Ray Ray being seen as the the hot the masters of the universe in the black community, and the guys who are educated, straight laced, clean cut, do the right thing, you're seen of having no value. And I'm going to say, from an anecdotal perspective, one could say that there are situations that reflect that, but when you look at it from the totality of the culture itself, I think it happens more than what it needs to happen, that it should happen, but it doesn't make up the majority of black people. I don't agree with that.
Hey, one thing kind of continue this. One thing I noticed that a lot of guys do in the space. So generally, when people achieve upward mobility, they their frame of reference is largely like their family. But I notice these guys, when they obtain upward mobility, they tend to juxtapose their success to like their view of failure of black people collectively.
Repeat that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering. So I said, when people normally achieve upward mobility, their frame of reference tend to compare themselves to their family, like how they were doing compared to like their parent or their grandparents. Yes. But in this sector, I know a lot of the black guys, some of the black women too, whenever they achieve success, they kind of juxtapose themselves to black people collectively,
right?
Which they view like as just other failures,
right? Because they no longer see themselves in that manner. They feel that because I am a exception to the rule, therefore I don't, those things don't apply to me. And so they don't see themselves as the same, because if they see themselves as the same, they see themselves as a failure, because that's how they view the black. And I've heard this time and time again about the black community being highly dysfunctional, and that's full of failures. It's full of criminals and all the stereotypical things that other groups say about us. They reflect that. Matter of fact, I will just go out and say, sometimes if the voices were different, you'll think you're in a white supremacist meeting, because some of the rhetoric and how they would talk about black people reflects that of white supremacist groups. From my position.
Oh no, I totally agree. That does make me. This is more of a general question. This doesn't have to do with race. So the term red pill rage, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so this is one criticism I have. I get the point that that a guy can grow up to be kind of disillusioned by what they learn as a younger person about women, but people can be disillusioned about almost anything. I mean, like somebody who's taught that society is fair, and of course they grow up and realize that no, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, or I don't know. It just various topics. I'm kind of curious, why is it in this space that people are most frustrated when it comes to women compared to almost any other topic that they could be disillusioned by?
The reason that they're disillusioned by women is because they have failed to develop proper relationships with women.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's somewhat paradoxical to me in a sense of, you look at females in such a negative way, and also in a way in which we should avoid them, but you continue to talk about them every day as the main topic of every situation, that's every show that's loaded, uploaded, or live streamed on YouTube. And that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't seem logical. So you dislike black women, you don't like the way they act, you claim that they left you and they went to white zaddy and all these other different things, but you continue to talk about their nature and things about them as if it's like rocket science or some type of code you have to crack to keep her in order. And you do this every day. And at the same time, as you may know, as being in these spaces, you've seen some of these same people do what they would call blue pill behaviors for some of these women. They've got exposed for talking this type of rhetoric, but then they've been exposed for doing some outlandish things for females. But you have to understand, and some of these guys, as they talk about their history with women that have led them to this point, a lot of it deals with the fact that they have been exploited. Mm-hmm. They've been taken advantage of, but it has happened repetitiously. Therefore, they did not learn from previous situations. There are people talking about stuff that happened to them. They're 40, 50 years old, and they're talking about stuff that happened at the age of 18. And they have not grown from that. They have not grown from that. They have not learned to disengage from that thought process, move on, better themselves. There are people still mad that they didn't date the prom queen. Now, the prom queen could be somebody that developed into an adult that you would despise, but they're still caught up on juvenile activities that are meaningless to where they are in their life. And to me, that is somewhat problematic to growth and maturity. That at the age of 45, 50 years old, you're still thinking about something happened to you when you're 21. Like, come on, man. Like, it's time to just move forward. And I think that when we're talking about the thing about with females and so forth, the problem is that a lot of these guys really want female companionship. They want female relationships, and they want to be married and have children with black females. The issue is that they don't see the issues that they have brought that have hindered them to obtaining that. They have the mindset of thinking that the issue is the black female, not necessarily them. And that, to me, is the issue that that's actually one of the number one things that I've been trying to debate them on. Thus, that anger of not developing that in some way transitions into red pill rage. And red pill rage is simply being angry to feel like that you feel like you have discovered this phenomenon of what the world is really like, and I feel like I've been duped and lied to and so forth. But what red pill rage is not grounded in reality. Red pill rage is grounded in emotion, in a flawed perception of the fact that you contributed to some of the pain that you're dealing with. You contributed to the fact that you didn't learn. You dated 5 females that took advantage of you, and they all have similar attributes and similar behaviors, and you didn't learn from it. No, it's not the fact that the women did these things, which is they should be accountable for mistreating you, but the fact that you continuously, repetitively did this over and over, and you didn't change one thing. So you have to take accountability for that. but of course, in this space, black male accountability is somewhat always, you know, um, you know, it's never talked about and is not valued, or people dismiss it. So that what contributes to red pill rage, the anger, and to me, I've been working on a therapy, and I plan on actually writing a course on how to deal with red pill rage, and I'm going to put a clinical stance in it because what has happened and what I have found is that um, there are a lot of guys who adopt this ideology in this space who have passed domestic violence cases and so on, and they've been in these domestic violence type cases, or they committed crimes in which they've caused harm to black females, and they'll gaslight and say things such as, "I didn't do nothing wrong. It was all her. Why would she call the police on me?" See, these are things. Right now, I'm actually developing a domestic violence um, um, program for my company, and when I hear the people in the training, some of these guys sound exactly like the people on this platform on YouTube. They say some of the same things, make the same excuses about the women. They think of women in some of the similar ways, and many of these guys have been involved in that. And there are people that have been exposed. There are people who have been exposed to have committed these types of crimes against women, and that's just not safe. That's not safe for black women.
Okay, I think Gabe has a good question that made me think, actually. Yeah, for those who don't share the opinions of the majority of the Manosphere ideas, why do we keep watching? Personally, I find it hard not to watch, although I know I disagree with most of it. And I would say for me personally, so when I first came across the space in June, it was actually April 2018. I didn't think anything of it. I found it entertaining. It was only like months later that I started to see it problematic, and I just wanted to kind of write about it because I just couldn't believe a journalist hadn't written at least about the black sector of the red pill. So that's the only reason why I watch it. But initially, I just found it, even though I disagreed, I'm like, this is pretty entertaining. But it gets kind of boring because I'm a news junkie and I just don't care to hear guys talk about relationships all day. But yeah, that's true. I know there's a lot of people in the space who don't even necessarily agree with the talking points, but they still listen. Some will still defend certain content creators pretty vigorously.
Yeah, because it's entertaining. You don't know what stupid rhetoric they're going to say. You don't know what they're going to say for shock value. You don't know who's going to beef with somebody, and so it's a soap opera, and a lot of spontaneous off the cuff things happen, and everybody's looking for the next crucial thing that everybody's going to be talking about. So that's why I listen. I don't agree with 99% of what they say for the most part. I'll be honest with you. When I first entered into the space, it was actually it was not like this. They were actually it was more self-help orientated. Now, yes, it did have the core of being red pill and so forth. But people were talking more about there was more content on helping guys deal with child support, which I think is an issue that is a realistic issue, family type issues. There were more things about guys getting certifications and things if they didn't want to go to college. And so it was more self-help and so forth. And then it just morphed into what it is now. Now, there still were people who talk now just the way they did 5-6 years ago. That was there, but that was a little bit more that was I think helpful, as opposed to now the thing just talking about relationships all day. It just makes up like 99% of the content. And see, and for myself as a therapist, I get very frustrated at men that don't understand the dynamics of relationships and so forth, saying the stuff that they're saying and influencing other guys to think the way that they think, which leads to the same, again, adverse and conflictual relationships with females. And we got to understand, this space does not consist of a lot of guys who are married. This space does not consist of guys who claim they know so much about relationships, but they have not ever been married, and nor are they in a successful relationship. And I just want to a lot of these guys are alone. They live alone. You know, they may have children, they may not, but a lot of these guys live alone. You know, and that's why they're on YouTube all the time, because they don't have other things to be involved in. You know, they just have themselves, so they can, you know, be on YouTube 8 hours a day or whatever, doing content or being on panels, and so that contributes to that.
I kind of want to say, you know, talking about therapy. So is YouTube for some people like a form of escapism? Because, you know, sometimes I'm working from home, but sometimes I'll just glance at it and I'll see people do live streams every single day for like 2 or 3+ hours. And I'm just like, man, like you would think they would have more going on in their lives.
It is a way of getting away from things. It does serve as an escape, as a way to you know, get away from realities, particularly if things are not great in your life. You know, but particularly if you really don't have anything really substantial, any success. I mean, there are guys in this space that live with their parents. There are guys in this space. I'm just being honest. I mean, there are guys in this space that live in 1-bedroom efficiencies with a computer, a blow up doll, and a blow up mattress, and that's their life. I'm just being honest, and I hate to say that, but that's the reality. There are guys that don't leave out of their apartment. I've seen this. I've seen this with some of these guys. There are guys here that don't interact with women, period. And the only way that they interact with women is on YouTube. I mean, they totally have no friends. They have no other interaction. They don't work. They basically interact. There are people on here that are actually homeless. And they're doing content. And matter of fact, I was in downtown Houston. I want to say this was probably 3 or 4 months ago. And I was under the freeway getting ready to make a U-turn to get back on the feeder road to get back on the highway. And I literally saw a guy who was sitting outside of this blow-up type of like a tent. And he had some kind of like a something to sit his, I don't know what it was, but a chair or something he was sitting the computer on. He was literally, he had a mic and he had a computer, and he was typing and talking. And this computer was charged up, and he was literally typing and talking through a mic. I don't know if he was doing a podcast or on a live stream, but I literally saw that. And this was about 4 months ago. So that this does exist. I mean, there are people that live in a lot of precarious situations, and YouTube allows you to embellish upon yourself. It allows you to create a caricature of yourself to give yourself some level of sophistication and so forth, or give yourself some level of high esteem that you have not been afforded in real life. So it is a deterrent from reality. And a lot of guys are addicted to that. Yeah, they're addicted to that.
Okay, the homeless content creator, that's new to me. I knew there was
there are guys who are probably between, and let's understand that homeless just doesn't mean as this
not having shelter.
It just doesn't mean that you're out in the street. Homeless could mean you're living with you live in a place that you don't own, but it also means that you're moving from house to house, place to place. There are people that I know for a fact. There's one popular female content creator that was living in an extended stay for a long period of time. And the way she paid for that extended stay, her and her boyfriend made money off of YouTube. That's facts. And there are guys in here right now know exactly who I'm talking about. I see several guys in here right now. They know exactly who I'm talking about. She lived in an extended stay for a long period of time. And there are people like that who are homeless, who actually live, you know, in places that they don't own, or it's, that they're living from place to place. And YouTube is their means of income so that they can survive. You know, And at first, I remember there's a country, I'm not gonna say his name, but when I first really entered to the space and was trying to, develop my platform, when I had D Durrell platform that was actually was bigger, he exposed me to that, and I didn't believe him. But until the more and more I became popular, and the more and more I interacted with people and talked to people offline, I learned of people just like that. And some of these guys are very popular that actually make a great deal of money, decent money on YouTube, and they're living some of the worst lives, like that you would ever imagine. Yeah, and it was actually kind of depressing, to be honest with you. But that basically is how it goes. But there are people like that live very, very unsuccessful lives, very, that they're not, polished by any means of imagination. They never been successful at anything. There are guys that have track records. There's guys that are registered sex offenders. There are guys who have felonies. I mean, there are people like that, and this is their means of making an income. And so YouTube is a means of survival. That's how important it is for some of these guys. And the Manosphere is seen as a way of making money for a lot of guys. It's a means of making money. Love it or hate it, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, that's something I noticed a while ago. Whenever like content creators like beef with one another, they'll like quote unquote dox one another as well. And then you look into somebody's life and they just find a lot of contradictions or a lot of omissions. My favorite are people who brag about traveling to this country and that country and just omit the fact that they were in the military, but they just portray it like they were going on their own dimes.
Going on their own dimes across seas.
Yeah, but it was like mostly military travel, but they just kind of omit that. I see that a lot sometimes.
Yeah, that I mean, I looked at that. I mean, I had an issue again because I got involved with the passport issues with guys who do the passport stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't bullied. I won't say they attempted to bully me, but there were certain people that were in the high nights of SYSBM who emailed me that did not want me to do content on a particular guy that was in that sector who actually, was found out to have done some egregious crimes. I did it anyway because I didn't care because it was basically, if it said I feel like I need to speak on it. I deal with this type of stuff all the time. I deal with sex offenders. I deal with the perpetrators, and I also deal with the victims. And so why shouldn't I avoid this issue if this is something somebody should not be doing? And it only validates my fact that a lot of these people are going out there doing a lot of crazy stuff that they have no business doing. They know they would not get away with in the States. So, I mean, for me, if you travel via the military, okay, you travel for free through the military. I look at it all the same. But my thing is that to give this embellished illustration of how wonderful the women are in these cultures, and it's this, I'm like, just stop it. If it was that great, these people would not be, basically doing whatever they can to come here. If it was that great, they would stay there. And also other people would be dying to go there and stay if it was that great. And it's not.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have one last question. I'll ask anybody in the chat to have questions. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like you that are in the chat.
Oh yeah, and I appreciate that. I hope I'm making you some money, man. I see people. Hey, if you don't like me, you might as well cash app him at least $2 to $3 or $5. That's the minimum you can do for his time.
No, it's okay. I mean, I try not to block people because I think as a YouTube channel, that's really bad to do that. So, and not to mention some of them, they do support my channel. They just have a disagreement. So, and that's okay. I always tell my subscribers that they should disagree with me anyway. So yeah, the last question I have. So yeah, one thing I know, one characteristic. No, it's not that. No, it's not. What's the last question? Oh yeah, it's about venting. Yeah. So there's a lot of guys in the space they've been on YouTube for years. Some have been on here for over a decade, and they'll rationalize their presence as well. I'm just venting, trying to heal, but they've been doing it for years, and there's just like no progression and solution. So, from a clinical perspective, what is a proper way to vent?
YouTube could be used as a proper means to vent as long as you minimize certain aspects of what you're going through. Like I said, there are many, and there's some people in here that I've actually stopped them from venting and saying some things that I think would implicate themselves. It could be used properly if you in some way were more careful with going into detail about certain things. If you cannot, you can vent, but also there's a such thing as therapeutic venting. And in therapeutic venting, you're basically releasing all of the irritability of what you're dealing with and frustrations, but you're doing it in a structured manner. Okay? So if you're going to vent, excuse me, please vent in which you're getting out the things and just keep it to whatever topic you want to vent out and just leave it at that. Don't go into a 2-hour venting session. That's if you were going more into a 15, 20 minute, okay, that's fine. But when you go into 2 hours of venting, 3 hours of venting, no, that's going beyond that. Now you're exposing things. Now you're saying things. Now you seem a little bit unhinged. So when you're therapeutically venting, there's a focus that it consists of. And that's to basically identify the thought, identify what happened to you that is somewhat bothering you, and basically give your honest opinion, no matter how bad it sounds or how angry you are. You verbally let those things out, and then once you accomplish that, we address how you feel after you did it. That's from a therapeutic standpoint. That's how you would approach that. Venting is fine, but unfortunately, when it's done on here without without knowing effective ways to vent, they'll get into these long, hour-long, 2-hour-long venting sessions, and then it now just becomes a person unhinged and just talking crazy and saying all kinds of things for views. That's the way I perceive it. So again, that's another means in which it could be used properly, but in most times it's not.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I never understood. I just think people, even though you say people might vent like on like live streams, some just been doing it for years. And you ask them, it's usually like their mothers or a bad relationship, and I just always wonder why it hasn't come to an end at some point.
I mean, some people they vent all the time. There's no ending. It all depends,
Okay, so yeah, the last question I was asked all my guests, do you have any last words for the audience as related to the topic at hand?
I appreciate all the love that I've seen in here, man. Oh wow, it's just wonderful to see that people care so much to follow me on a platform. This is actually our first interview, and I appreciate all the watch time that you have afforded Mr. Exposed to Manosphere. I actually encourage you all, since you follow me, again, though he's not asking, you could at least cash app him or super chat him at least $2.99. That's the minimum you can do for your efforts of focus on me in the manner that you did. But other than that, I want to say that I think that you're doing a great job. I'm getting ready. I'm actually going to be. I plan to review some of your work. I plan because I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start reviewing more literature, as on my Life Solutions channel, and the work that you did was more focused. It's more was it sociological works, or what was the basis of your 3 works that you had published?
Are you talking about the articles?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I can't say they were sociological. I was more just looking more analytically at the community and trying to document it, because I was kind of shocked journalists haven't like covered it yet. In fact, I just got this book in the mail. Men Who Hate Women. It's a book actually on the Manosphere, incel PUAs. It's I can't say it's not the first book on the subject. I got 2 on my bookshelf, but it's actually the most recent one. I'm going to read it, and hopefully, if I read it, I can interview the author. I will actually like to just to pick her brain. Right.
And so that's something I'm planning on doing. I have several books that a couple of them I have read, but I'm going to do some book reviews on my life solutions. I want to do more reviews of literature and so forth. I'm going to do more, since this whole thing about research and so forth. I'm going to do more research to kind of talk about and explain the research in a way that people can understand, and understand how to read research and how to critique it and how to give a report. And so I'm going to focus on reviewing more literature from some of the professional organizations that I belong to, because we are privy to, we do have access to literature and research that others don't. So I'm going to try to provide more analysis on psychological research and so forth. So that's some of the content I'll be doing. I hope for those, seem like a lot of people in here know who I am. So I don't think they're going to subscribe to me. But if you want to subscribe and share, subscribe to my channel, please do. Subscribe to D. Durrell The Rebirth and read D. Durrell Life Solutions. Other than that, guys, it's been wonderful having this discussion with you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, somebody asked a question at the last minute. I don't know if you want to answer it or not.
Yeah, go ahead. I can
answer.
I got time.
He said there are a lot of men who suffer from autism in the space. Yeah, do you believe that there are men who suffer from autism in the space?
No. Autism. When you're talking about the autism spectrum, autism is diagnosed typically when children are very young, around the ages of probably 3 to 8, and it's a communication disorder in which a person has limited range of emotions, lack of response, lack of adaptability, and so forth, in social situations. That does not characterize guys in this space. It doesn't.
That's solid. That word gets thrown around a lot, but
yeah. Now there are some people that they may use it in a term to try to say somebody's slow, but autism doesn't necessarily mean slow. Autism means that there are adaptability and social restraints in regards to their natural communication and interaction. And you got to understand that there's severe, profound levels of autism, and then there's mild and moderate. And then in which profound or severe, they may not be verbal, and so forth. But in particularly mild or moderate, they may be verbal. And a lot of times when you look at someone that's mildly autism, it's very difficult. I'm not going to say a lot, but there's a healthy percentage of those diagnosed with mild autism who it would be very difficult to tell if, them from anybody else, unless they were triggered by some spontaneous situation that then they have difficulty coping with. And then you would start seeing some of the behaviors of an autistic client that would fit that diagnosis.
Okay, I think that's solid. But other than that, the only thing I can say is I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate the donation. I do have a Cash App. I just don't really advertise it because I think the whole point of a donation should be voluntary. I don't really feel the need to ask for donations.
Yeah, sure. I understand. But hey, it's your time, man. Your time is valuable. I felt the same way. The D. Durrell channel that I had that got shut down, that actually was spoken about multiple times in the chat. They claimed I was cyberbullying, but that channel, when I initially was able to be monetized back in, I want to say February, I didn't really care for that, but I was convinced by others to do it because they liked the content and they wanted to donate. So I actually monetized the channel like 3 months later, and start receiving donations and cash apps and super chats. And so I'm like, okay, if I want to accept it, I just take the money and give it to a cause, and I give it to my group home, because I have low income clients that have mental illness, and so I know that they don't have a lot of money after paying rent, and so they could use that money for their own personal needs. So that's kind of what I do. I just find a cause, and I use that as a means of donating, So.
Okay, I'm just getting a link if somebody wants to link to the Cash App. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it to you. But no, other than that, yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime, brother.
Okay, so I'll just drop the link and then I'll log out.
Okay.
Yeah, other than that, yeah, everybody, I'm working on a pre-recorded video. Hopefully I can drop it on Sunday. I couldn't do it last week because I went out of town. I needed a quick break.
Hey, I understand.
Yeah, but no, I'm looking forward to getting back to more pre-recorded content because there's a lot of topics I've been sitting on for months that I haven't even gotten to yet. And
Sure.
I'm still balancing other obligations I have in my
Yeah,
actual life.
of course. Well, I thank you for your time. And I know you're still working on your PhD, correct?
Yeah, dissertation, and I got a book chapter due next month for a anthology that's coming up. That'll come out sometime, probably either later this year or next year.
Okay. Well, good luck on that, and I wish you the best, man. I'm definitely going to be watching with great interest once you have accomplished those feats.
Okay, well, appreciate it,
All right.
and to everybody else, I will just say have a good night.
All right. Peace.